sure you didn't need a reminder of how important the financial side of planning for retirement is, but if you did, got one the last couple of weeks. I'm Joe Casey, and you're listening to the Retirement Wisdom Podcast. And our podcast focuses on the other side of retirement planning, how you'll invest your time. A few times a year, we touch base on the fundamental importance of financial planning, and today is one of those days. Our guest today believes that a holistic approach is the best way to plan for retirement. Lane Martinsen is the author of the new book, 5W Retirement Blueprint: Maximize Your Retirement Income Through Holistic Planning. Lane is the principal of Martinsen Wealth Management located in Tempe, Arizona. He's an Ed Slott Elite IRA advisor and a member of the National Ethics Association. He has a diverse background within the financial service industry that first started in 1988. In addition to serving his own clients, he's trained and mentored hundreds of other financial advisors from all parts of the country. Lane and his wife Tara met in college and recently celebrated their 31st anniversary. They have 5 children and 6 grandchildren. Lane, thanks for visiting with us today.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's really a privilege. And I was really looking forward to meeting you because of what you do, right? Your work and how you deal with kind of the stuff that gets neglected, the non-financial side of stuff. But so thank you for having me.
And I'd like to kick off just by telling us about holistic planning for retirement.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of been our focus over the years, is to really take a big picture view. And holistic planning, it's really not traditional. Most financial planning is kind of transactional in nature, and it's specific to a certain transaction or a certain goal. But when it comes to retirement planning, and we're going to plan for decades, right? The quality of the planning becomes much more important. And holistic is just taking in all the aspects. So it's certainly much more than investing, right? You're looking at the tax implications over time, healthcare. Will my money run out? What are the things that can cause problems down the road? So it's really looking at our housing and healthcare, taxes, and all of that.
There's still obviously a lot to consider, a lot of moving pieces.
Right. Yeah, and it's a little overwhelming for most retirees. They're busy in their careers. They're not experts in all these various areas. And so how do you piece it together and make sure you've got a good plan? That's really what we try to do.
So let's talk about your book. It introduces a 5W retirement blueprint idea. Could you explain the 5 Ws?
Yeah, the 5 Ws are the 5 key areas of wealth management. So it includes investment planning, it includes income planning, tax planning, healthcare planning, and legacy or estate planning. So those are kind of the 5 big areas that you can't really neglect any of those. So if you're leaving one or two of those off, you really don't have a complete plan. So that's where we get the title of the book, the 5W Retirement Blueprint.
And in your work, what are some of the risks that people might overlook in planning for retirement?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. A lot of times people they don't understand sequence of returns risk, for one. And a big reason for that is because they've never had to deal with it, right? All during their working years, there is no sequence of returns risk. It's only as they get close to retirement and in those retirement years. And people don't really know how that works and what is the risk. And so that's one big one where we like to, educate them. And you really can manage it well when you have a strategy to do so. But if you don't have that strategy, then there's more risk than you should take. Inflation, of course, losing buying power every year is something you have to account for. And a lot of times people aren't really thinking through that. RMDs that kick in and can cause additional taxation. We call them tax triggers. It's like you kind of think you kind of know what the tax brackets are, and then, oh, wait a minute, now I have some extra tax on this, or my Medicare goes up, and so there's little surprises like that we like to shine a light on and make sure we're not doing things that cause our money to be depleted prematurely.
And with sequence risk, certainly had a reminder of that in recent weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a volatile market, and I can, with confidence, predict, which we don't ever like to make predictions, but one prediction I can make is that there will be volatility in the markets, right? There always is. It's in the nature of the markets, and you just have to understand that. And as long as you've got the time frames and you've got the right strategies, it's nothing to be feared. It's lack of preparation is something to be feared.
There's also the non-financial side of retirement to plan for, which is what we focus on. But you've got a front row seat working with your clients to really see how that plays out for different people. What do you see people overlooking or underestimating when it comes to the non-financial aspects?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, it's fun to because we're really in that kind of the niche where we help people go from working and within a year or two or three, they are actually retiring. And so we have a lot of clients who have gone through that transition. And for some, they're surprised that like I was so excited to retire and I didn't expect that I'd be bored as often as I am. A lot of times they'll say, I feel like I kind of have a lot of things on our calendar, but very often it's like we got 3 hours with just nothing to do. And I hear that a fair amount. And others, sometimes they actually want to go back to work or they want to go part-time or so we try to, and I know you're really good at this, but the importance of having a purpose, right? Having goals, having something you're working towards, whatever that may be. If you're not actively engaged in pursuing something, you're not going to be happy, right?
Absolutely. And during the working years, we all get quite familiar with time poverty, not having enough time to do things we want to do. And then suddenly we're time rich. And I was rereading a study done by previous podcast guest, Cassie Lums. She's a professor at UCLA in marketing. And she found that there's such a thing as too much time and too little time. But on the too much time, it's about 5 hours of free time becomes that tipping point where it becomes a problem, not as much an opportunity. But it's a great opportunity for people to think about what they could do with that time, all the things they always wanted to do, but couldn't.
Right. One of the considerations is a lot of times if they have more time on their hands, a lot of times when they think of things they want to do to fill that time, it usually is something that costs, right? It's more travel or some hobby that has an expense to it. And so they find themselves maybe spending more than they thought. So that all these things are really important to kind of think through in advance so you kind of know what you're in for.
That's a great point about free time. It's not just the time costs. It's if you get involved in things they could rack up some costs pretty quickly you may not be fully anticipating. So when you think about the clients you work with, what's the difference between people who you see that are thriving in retirement and those who maybe are struggling with the transition?
That's a good question. I mean, there's definitely the financial side, and then there's the living side of the equation. When you got to, when the financial part's in place, you've got a high level of confidence and peace of mind. It really does enable them to enjoy. If they don't have a good plan, we'll see people who have been retired, they'll come in and they're stressed out. I'll tell you, a stressed out person is a retiree. They maybe have a pile of money. And so it seems like they have a good amount of money, but they have no real income plan. So they don't really know how much they can spend, how much they can't. And they're stressed. They're watching the market every day. That's a terrible way to go through retirement. You really want to know, what are your paychecks? What can you depend on with a high level of confidence? I'm not sure if I answered the question.
No, absolutely. So having that certainty, having that clarity can really free you up to focus on other things rather than worrying about.
Yeah. And just getting, hopefully you can have some passions of whether it's service or whatever it is, family, but things that if we don't have goals that we're striving for at every age, that becomes a very boring life. We've got to be seeking and stretching ourselves. And yeah.
And along those lines about passions and goals, I wonder if you could just tell people a little bit about yourself. We were talking before we started recording, and just a little bit more about you, because when people are considering financial advisors, there's expertise that comes first, but they also want to know a little bit about the person. So tell us a little bit about you outside of work.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my wife and I, we've been married for 37 years. We have 5 kids, and our kids have had kids. And so we actually have 11 grandkids now.
Wow.
I would think I became a grandpa before I was 50. So we're young grandparents. We had kids early, and our kids had kids early. And so it's fun. It's really a lot of fun. Our kids are now spread out around the country. We have them in North Carolina, Texas, Utah, and Arizona. So, but it's great. So yeah, that's as far as my family. We've been a financial planner for a lot of years. Martinsen Wealth Management is our firm. We're based out of Tempe, Arizona, but we service clients all around the country, and we have a great team of professionals here on our team. So that's a little bit about me.
So once a year, I do a podcast on grandparenting, and people are very interested in that topic. Any lessons you'd share on grandparenting? We only have one; she just turned 3, but I'm sure with 11, you've got a lot of wealth of information to draw upon. Any advice for us grandparents out there?
Well, yeah, it's the reward of being a parent is to be a grandparent for sure. It's just fun. They're all so each one's so different, their own little personalities. So it's just a blessing. I don't know if I have advice. You just love them, and then the parents take them and do all the hard stuff, right?
Absolutely, that works. So when people think about retirement planning, there are those who are ahead of the game and plan early. I actually have had a couple clients who started to work on the non-financial side, both financial advisors, by the way, 5 years out. Most people that I work with are about a year and a half out. How about on the financial side? What would you say are some do's and don'ts in planning for retirement for someone who's 5 years away?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things, right? I mean, it's really. I think this one starting point would be knowing what your budget is, and how much income do you need in retirement to live comfortably, and it's a surprisingly difficult question. A lot of times they don't know. Their incomes may be higher, but they're contributing a lot, maybe into 401ks, and they've got a lot of things going on. How much really? So we like to do what's called a spending audit. We say, for 30 days, let's see exactly where your money went and figure out, because if you know that what you're going to be spending and you can increase that for inflation, that's half the battle right there. You've got to know that. So that would be something you start thinking about. And then it's, if you're 5 years out, it's probably, is it 5 years out? Maybe you could retire sooner. Maybe you need to work another couple of years longer. Those are big questions that we like to help answer. What's your risk tolerance? It needs to change as you get closer to retirement, right? Because of the sequence risk, there are things that someone that's approaching that age would be doing different than someone that's much younger, right? As far as risk and having things prepared. There's tax strategies that they could start doing Roth conversions so they can reduce the RMD impact when that comes. There's a lot of things to be tax efficient that you would want to start 5 years out if you could. But whatever your timing is, you do the best you can where you are.
Those are great points. And how about 1 year? Because as we know, many people procrastinate. And so a year away, what advice would you give for that person?
Yeah, if you're a year away from retiring, it's just time to get more detailed. You really should have a written income plan, retirement plan. We call ours the retirement blueprint. And it's really taking into account all the factors, right? What is it going to look like? And you want to stress test it, a portfolio, the income plan. If this happens, what happens? This happens, or if tax rates go up, what happens? If there's early market volatility in your retirement, what does that look like? So it's just knowing, we can't anticipate every risk or every problem because there's a lot of them, but we want to do the best we can. So what are the major things that could really throw things off? Let's have a plan. Let's stress test that plan so that you can really have peace of mind knowing you're going to be in good shape. So getting serious is what I would say if you're a year out.
And if you've got 5 years, you've got time to do that blueprint, come up with a game plan. But it sounds like with the 1 year out, it's kind of a hurry up offense, 2-minute drill in a sense. One thing is, I was listening to you talk about the 5 years out. Every year I read the Employee Benefit Research Institute study, and I was looking at theirs back in November. And very consistently for many, many years, they find that almost half of people retire years earlier than they planned. And so I'm just interested in your thoughts about how people should be thinking about a plan B, a backup plan in case that happens. Because for most people, it's some by choice, but for most people, it's things beyond their control, their own health, family health, or company restructurings, reorgs, downsizing, layoffs.
Yeah, that's right. That definitely happens where people want to work longer and for some reason they can't, right? So it's just being as prepared as you can possibly be. So obviously, hopefully there's been saving enough and making sure there's no debt in the mix. Debt can really hold you back. And if you're truly cut short, then you may need to have a somewhat reduced income in retirement. And just knowing what that is, maybe it includes downsizing. Maybe there's some other major things that have to happen if if you're forced into a situation like that. Regardless of what someone's financial position is, even if they're very unprepared, I always tell them there's always things you can do. You can get creative, you can set goals, you can make the best of your situation. And so it becomes very personal, very customized, depending on what those resources are, what the needs are.
And you mentioned earlier people going back to work, some because of financial circumstances, others because they really miss some things about work, colleagues, intellectual challenges, etc. What are you noticing about this trend of people unretiring and returning to work?
Yeah, especially those who are really highly skilled. You have where they kind of they'd like to retire, but their employers are so they want them to stay so badly. They'll just keep increasing their rate, they'll pay them super high amounts. They're like, they want me to stay another year. They're paying me so much money. I can't really. Sometimes it's hard for people to leave that. Other times they retire, and then they get a contract. So they get recruited, and they're like, hey, they'll make the terms. Look, you only have to do part time. You only have they'll do anything they can because they want that person's skills, and because there's a shortage of a lot of times certain skill sets, and guys retiring that are highly trained in certain areas. Sometimes hard for them to retire. Everybody wants them. So.
And one last question. You mentioned you've been married 37 years, if I remember correctly. I'm working on 45. I'm on a series of 1-year contracts. So each year you're on my way. What advice or observations do you have for couples? Not everyone who listens to this podcast is married or in a significant relationship. Many people are single, but many people are married. Any advice or observations on couples planning for retirement?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a great question. Yeah, it's something that we have seen is where a couple retires and their idea of retirement is entirely different from each other. And where they had a good marriage all the way up until retirement, all of a sudden they're struggling at a new level, right? And then you hear this, what they call it, silver divorce, and there's kind of a spike actually, where they kind of want to go in different directions. So that's definitely something to be thinking about, making sure you're on the same page and making compromises. Successful marriage, I guess I don't know if I have a great answer other than you love each other, you make sacrifices, and you have common goals. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful, beautiful wife, very grateful. But I know a lot of people don't have that, and that can definitely be a real struggle.
Well, with 11 grandchildren, certainly a lot to be grateful for. But thank you, Lane, for sharing your wisdom with us today, talking through the 5W retirement blueprint idea. And Buck, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Joel, very much. Take care.
Time for takeaways, practical ideas following today's conversation with Lane Martinsen. Number 1, how holistic is your retirement planning? His main point was that really true retirement planning goes way beyond investments. It really must address 5 key areas that he brought up, the 5 W's: investment planning, income planning, tax planning, healthcare and legacy / estate planning. Are you covering the waterfront, or do you have some areas that need attention? Number 2, if you're married or in a relationship, is your partner in sync? Couples often have very different ideas and visions for retirement, and that can create some tension and misalignment. So have conversations early and often to make sure you and your partner are on the same page. And if not, you can create a third vision. Number 3, create a written retirement blueprint. His book provides a roadmap on how to do that, to really create a comprehensive written plan that can really account for all those 5 areas of wealth management covered. Ideally, something you do 5 years out from retirement if possible. Thanks for listening to the Retirement Wisdom Podcast. Our mission is to help you to retire smarter by looking at both sides of the retirement equation. We concentrate on the non-financial side, but you want to cover both.